Why, hello there. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Kate with Beautiful Light Home. I am a Waldorf homeschooling mama to two kiddos. My oldest, my son, he'll be 7 by the end of the summer. So this upcoming school year will be our first year of true Waldorf academics in first grade. And this video is part of an entire series I'm creating on how I'm creating my own Waldorf curriculum for first grade using some, I use Steiner's indications that he gave, as well as some tremendous Waldorf resources that are available out there. So I already have a video up about how I planned out our block rotation for the year. And I have another video about how I started planning our language arts curriculum for the year. So this video, I really wanted to focus on how I am gathering my resources for our language arts blocks. So the first thing is that you absolutely need this book. I've talked about this book before. I just finished reading all of this entire book. That's the first thing you need to do, is read this entire book. I mean, there are sections that I skipped over that pertain mostly to 2nd and 3rd grade that I'll revisit, but for the most part, you need to read this entire book, and there's like 600 pages to it. Ask me how I know. So it's The Roadmap to Literacy by Janet Langley and Jennifer Militzer Copperell. So I read all of this, and now I am gathering my resources, because that's step 2 for language arts blocks, is to gather all of your resources and all of your materials that you'll use throughout the entire year. After I'm done this step, I can then work on, my goal is before September comes, I want to have 2 language arts blocks completely planned out, like all of the weekly, what we'll be doing on a weekly basis for those blocks. So I am here in the second step, which is all about gathering my resources, and I want to share with you how I'm doing that. So first thing is, if you go to the Roadmap to Literacy website, they have forms for you to fill out to help you with this entire process. And this is the form I'm using right now. It says Summer Preparation Form Template for first grade. You cannot jump right to this stage. You absolutely need to read this book first, because there's very specific indications in here to help you with this. There's resources in here to help you with this. And you really don't even know what you're really looking for without reading this book. So you have to read this book first. But what I'm working on right now is coming up with our first grade is all about fairy tales. Because it meets the children where they're at developmentally, specifically on that spirit and soulful level. A 7-year-old is really in the feeling stage of their life, and this is the time where you educationally start bringing in morals and values, and they start learning right from wrong. They start to develop a stronger sense of their conscience. And so we want to help them develop that, and one great way to do that is through fairy tales. And so you weave fairy tales into every aspect of your teaching. So when you're teaching about the letters and phonics and everything like that, you need fairy tales to kind of bolster and support what you're teaching, and to introduce what you're teaching as well. So in first grade, when we're talking about the alphabet, for instance, you need at least one story for each letter that you're going to be introducing. So that's the first thing I've been working on, and this form, it's well loved already because I've already been using this form. It has what the letter is that you'll be teaching, and then they recommend in the Roadmap to Literacy having more than one story to lean on for each letter. And for some of the letters, at least the first 11 or so that you're going to be introducing, they highly suggest that the letter itself should pictorially come out of an image. So for instance, if you have the letter D, you want the D to be able to be found in whatever you're talking about. So for instance, I thought of the image of, and I've seen it recommended before, the image of a door. So you could see in your head how a door, like a rounded door, might make the shape of a D. So what I'm doing is I'm almost coming up with the images in my head before I look up the stories. So especially just from a time perspective. So I thought of a door in my mind. We're in a beautiful day and age where then you can go to Google and type in fairy tales with doors. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And the nice thing is that here's some of the resources I've been using. One, Grimm's fairy tales. And these are not the pretty, polished, Disney-fied versions of the Grimm's fairy tales. These are the authentic Grimm's fairy tales, and they are just that. They are Grimm. They are sometimes a little rough around the edges, but remember that's playing into the soulfulness of where the children are developmentally. So I'm using Grimm's fairy tales. That's one of my resources. I also have this treasury of magical tales from around the world that I have been taking some stories from. And then, like I was just saying, is I kind of come up with the image in my mind ahead of time. And I'm not always perfect with that, but I come up with like an image of some sort, and then I Google it. So I Google, like I said, a door in a fairy tale, fairy tales with doors. And what's nice about that is that it's been giving me some beautiful fairy tales from around the world. So I also have this folder here of first grade stories. So for instance, if I went to D, I have The Heart's Door, and it's a Finnish fairy tale that I'm using. So it's kind of cool to be able to bring in some other cultures and other elements instead of just the Germanic Grimm's fairy tales. I think I have like Chinese fairy tales. I have a whole bunch of different ones, Persian fairy tales. I have some really cool ones that are from around the world. So that's what I would start with, is kind of get an image in your mind of something that you can pictorially represent the letter through an image, and see if there's a fairy tale for it out there. There might not be, but you could certainly try. The other thing is that we could take some creative licenses, because we're going to be telling these stories verbally. We're not necessarily going to be reading the stories. That's another part of Waldorf education, is to kind of commit these stories to memory and then relay them and tell them with our heart versus from a page. So it's okay if we add some things in. Like I saw as a recommendation, there might be a hill in a fairy tale, and if you need an M for mountain, make it into a mountain. Maybe you need a valley, you can add a valley in. I think there's one where I am adding in like it's a zigzag path, and it's really just, it's an Irish fairy tale about fairies, and it's just a regular path, but I've turned it into a zigzag path. That's okay, we're able to do that. So I just wanted to show you where I am with all of this. So then you're gonna come up with related, like speech and songs. I have different poems book, like my Waldorf book of poetry, that I'm going to be bringing in different elements from. I had mentioned I didn't think I was going to be using this book, the LMNOP and all the letters A to Z. Turns out I am going to be using it, because what's nice is not only does it have that like pictorial presentation, like you can see here, here's a king, and the way his body is, it's making a K, right? So you could see how the letter comes from the picture itself. But the nice thing is that each of them have a little poem that we can use. So I'm going to use this as part of our poems and speech aspect when we introduce the letters. I'm actually glad that I turned to this. This is one of the reasons why. Now, this is a beautiful book. This is a great book, and I always see dragons represented for the letter D. And this is one of the reasons why you absolutely need to read this book, The Roadmap to Literacy, is because dragon, the way it starts, is a blend, D and R. It is not the typical sound for a D. So it's fine for speech and poetry and things like that, but you're not going to want to use the image of a dragon for creating the letter D, because it doesn't create the typical D sound. You want something that just makes the duh sound, like door. But you wouldn't know that unless you read this book. Or maybe you would, maybe you know this information, but I found all of that information, and there's plenty of other blends like snake. You don't want to use snake because SN is a blend. So there's all different information in the Roadmap to Literacy that you need. Okay, so gathering resources. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to continue gathering my resources, and then my next step, and hopefully my next video on this subject, will be all about how I gathered all my resources and how I'm moving towards creating our blocks. At least, like I said, I want at least 2 blocks done, like the weekly view for each block. So I hope this was helpful. If you have questions about gathering your resources, please let me know. Or if you have questions about writing your own curriculum in general, I'd be happy to help. I am a newbie at this as far as Waldorf goes, but I have created curriculum in past lives as far as like my careers have gone before. So I'd be happy to talk with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and thanks so much for joining me today.